The storm raged outside the ancient walls of the orphanage, the wind howling like a pack of wolves. Rain hammered against the windows, creating a symphony of chaos that echoed through the dimly lit hallways. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old books and dust, remnants of stories long forgotten. At the center of it all, Mr. Lee, the resident teacher, stood before a group of wide-eyed children, his hair sticking out at odd angles, looking as if he'd just been in a tussle with a particularly rowdy squirrel. "All right, my little night owls," he chirped, clapping his hands to grab their attention. "Who's ready to learn about the wonders of the universe today? Or, at the very least, the wonders of why socks always go missing in the laundry?" The children giggled, their laughter a bright spot in the otherwise gloomy atmosphere. Mr. Lee was known for his unconventional teaching methods, often punctuating lessons with jokes that made the kids roll their eyes yet laugh at the same time. He loved making them smile, especially in this old, creaky place where shadows lurked around every corner. As he began to weave a tale about the mystical adventures of missing socks, he heard it, a soft, haunting melody wafting through the hallways. The children had started to sing. "Not that song again," he muttered under his breath. It was the infamous Black Room Lullaby, a peculiar tune that had circulated through the orphanage like a ghost story. The legend had it that any child who dared to sing it at night would vanish into thin air. "Come on, kids. Let's stick to something cheerful, like 'Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star,' or 'The Muffin Man,'" he said, waving his arms dramatically. "You don't want to attract any, well, you know, spirits." "But Mr. Lee," piped up a brave little girl named May, "we like the lullaby. It's spooky and fun." Her wide, innocent eyes sparkled with mischief. "Spooky and fun?" Mr. Lee raised an eyebrow. "What's next? You'll want to take a field trip to the local haunted house?" The laughter that erupted was infectious, yet Mr. Lee felt a shiver down his spine as the lullaby continued, an eerie undertone woven through the sweet innocence of the children's voices. He tried to brush it off, focusing instead on keeping the kids entertained, but unease crept into his heart. There was something off about that song. Something dark. Later that night, as he prepared to retire, Mr. Lee could hear the lullaby drifting through the cracked walls. He climbed into bed, the storm still howling outside, but sleep eluded him. He rolled over and stared at the ceiling, trying to shake off the feeling of dread. "Just a song," he muttered to himself. "A silly old song." But then he remembered the stories. The tales of children who had sung the lullaby and simply disappeared. He shook his head, trying to dispel the thoughts. "It's just an urban legend," he assured himself, closing his eyes. The next morning, Mr. Lee awoke with a start. Sunlight streamed through the window, and he felt oddly refreshed. The storm had passed, leaving behind a bright blue sky. He dressed quickly, his mind still lingering on the previous night's events. As he stepped into the main room, the familiar sound of laughter greeted him. The children were gathered, whispering and giggling among themselves. "All right, little ones, what's the agenda today?" he asked, a grin spreading across his face. "More lullabies," shouted one of the older boys, Gene, with a mischievous glint in his eye. "Let's keep the singing to a minimum, shall we?" Mr. Lee chuckled, trying to keep the atmosphere light. "Instead, how about we learn about the wonders of the solar system?" But as he began his lesson, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. He noticed a shadow lurking in the corner of the room. It was Tao, a small boy with an adventurous spirit who had been unusually quiet. "Hey, Tao, everything all right?" Mr. Lee asked, his voice warm and inviting. Tao looked up, his eyes wide. "I heard the lullaby last night, Mr. Lee. It was magical. Magical? Or creepy? Mr. Lee asked, suppressing a shiver. Both, Tao exclaimed. It called to me, like it wanted me to come and play. Mr. Lee frowned, suddenly feeling the weight of responsibility bearing down on him. Listen, kids, he said, adopting a serious tone. That lullaby is not just a song. It's like a warning. You shouldn't sing it. Promise me you'll stop. The room fell silent, the children exchanging glances. Finally, May spoke up. But what if we disappear? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Exactly. Mr. Lee said, his heart racing. Exactly what I'm trying to say. It's a dangerous song. Let's sing something else, something safe. But that was when Mr. Lee noticed that Tao had slipped away, a determined look on his face. Tao, where are you going? He called after him, but the boy was already sprinting down the hall, a glimmer of mischief in his eye. Oh, Mr. Lee muttered, realizing he might have a bit of a situation on his hands that he raced after Tao, dodging around corners and nearly colliding with furniture. When he finally caught up, he found Tao standing in front of a door marked "Staff Only," his tiny hand poised over the doorknob. Wait! Mr. Lee shouted, skidding to a halt. You can't go in there. But Tao, ever the little rebel, turned and grinned. I just want to see what's behind the door. Maybe it's where the magic is. With a deep breath, Mr. Lee knew he couldn't let Tao go in alone. All right, but I'm coming with you. Just promise me you won't sing the lullaby. They entered the room together, and Mr. Lee was met with a wave of nostalgia. Dusty books lined the shelves, and old portraits hung crookedly on the walls. It was a treasure trove of forgotten knowledge, but it also felt ominous. As they explored, Mr. Lee discovered an ancient-looking book half hidden under a pile of papers. Its cover was cracked and faded, and he felt a twinge of unease as he opened it. The pages were filled with illustrations of spirits and strange symbols, interspersed with verses of the very lullaby that haunted the children. Mr. Lee, look. Tao pointed excitedly. It's the lullaby. Indeed, there it was, scrawled in elegant script. Mr. Lee felt a chill crawl up his spine. The verses were accompanied by annotations that suggested the song was a means of summoning something dark, something that had long been dormant. Listen, Tao, Mr. Lee said, trying to keep his voice steady, we need to close this book and get out of here. This isn't just some old rhyme, it's serious. But it's so interesting. Tao protested, his curiosity igniting. Curiosity killed the cat, you know, Mr. Lee warned, but it was too late. Tao had already begun to chant the lullaby under his breath, his voice soft and melodic. Stop! Mr. Lee shouted, but it was too late. A gust of wind blew through the room, scattering papers everywhere. Shadows flickered at the edges of the walls, and a feeling of dread filled the air. In that moment, Tao's eyes widened. Mr. Lee. I feel something. Let's get out of here. Mr. Lee yelled, grabbing Tao's hand and bolting for the door. But the shadows swirled around them, and just as they reached the exit, a cold, ghostly laugh echoed in the air. Lee burst through the door, pulling Tao along with him, but the laughter lingered in the air, wrapping around them like a thick fog. He knew that they had awoken something they shouldn't have, and panic surged through him. Did you hear that? Tao asked, looking back at the now closed door, his excitement replaced with fear. Yes, and that's exactly why we need to get back to the classroom and keep the others safe, Mr. Lee replied, his voice a mix of authority and urgency. They raced down the hallway, heartbeats echoing like drums in their ears. When they reached the classroom, Mr. Lee quickly gathered the other children, his mind racing. He had to warn them, but how could he explain the dangers without terrifying them? "All right, everyone," he said, trying to sound calm. "We need to talk about the lullaby and why it's important to avoid it from now on." "Is it because it's scary?" Jean piped up, his eyes glinting with mischief. "Partly," Mr. Lee admitted. "But it's also because it might call upon things we don't want to deal with. You all need to promise me that you won't sing it anymore." The children exchanged uncertain glances, but there was something in Mr. Lee's voice that commanded their attention. One by one, they nodded, albeit reluctantly. Just as Mr. Lee was beginning to feel a sense of relief, a loud crash resonated from the hallway. They all jumped, their eyes wide with terror. "Stay here," Mr. Lee ordered, positioning himself protectively in front of the kids. He peered cautiously around the door frame. To his astonishment, a large, shadowy figure loomed at the end of the hall, its outline flickering like a candle in the wind. "You've awakened me," it boomed, the voice echoing ominously. The children screamed, clinging to each other in fear. Mr. Lee's heart raced as he stepped forward, determination igniting within him. "What do you want?" he called out, trying to sound braver than he felt. "Your fear feeds me," the spirit snarled, a chilling grin spreading across its shadowy face. "And I hunger for the lost souls that linger in this place. Not if I can help it," Mr. Lee shouted, surprising even himself with the confidence in his voice. "You're not taking any of these children. You think you can stop me?" the spirit hissed, its form shifting as if to grow larger. "You are but a mere mortal." "True," Mr. Lee replied, feeling an unexpected spark of courage. "But I know how to fight back. Kids, remember that old folk song we practiced? The one about the brave little muffin man?" The children's eyes lit up with recognition. "Come on, everyone," Mr. Lee encouraged. "Let's sing together. Sing it loud." As the children joined in, their voices rising to a crescendo, the spirit recoiled. The cheerful melody of the Muffin Man mixed with their laughter pierced through the heavy darkness, creating a bubble of light that pushed against the shadowy figure. "No. Stop," the spirit shrieked, its form starting to dissipate under the power of their joyful song. "Keep going," Mr. Lee urged, feeling a surge of adrenaline. The laughter and warmth of the children surrounded him, transforming their fear into a powerful shield. The spirit writhed, shadows peeling away as the cheerful notes of the song rang through the air. "You can't banish me," it screeched, but its voice was growing fainter. "Just watch us," May shouted, her voice strong and unwavering. With a final triumphant flourish, the children belted out the last line, and the spirit let out a final, heart-wrenching wail before disappearing into a cloud of swirling mist. Silence fell over the orphanage, punctuated only by the children's heavy breathing. Mr. Lee stood frozen for a moment, absorbing the weight of what had just happened. "Did we really?" Tao gasped, his eyes wide with disbelief. Mr. Lee turned to the children, a smile breaking across his face. "Yes. You all did it. You faced the fear together." They erupted into cheers, the air filled with laughter once more. The once ominous atmosphere of the orphanage shifted, as if the weight of shadows had lifted. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through the windows, Mr. Lee gathered the children around him. "Now that we've taken care of that, let's promise to fill this place with joy and laughter. No more lullabies, okay?" "Okay," the children chorused, their faces beaming with newfound bravery, and so, the orphanage transformed into a haven of happiness. Laughter replaced the whispers of fear, and the shadows that once haunted the halls became mere memories. Mr. Lee, the eccentric teacher with a flair for the ridiculous, had become their protector, guiding them through darkness with humor and love. As they sang silly songs and shared stories, he realized that sometimes, the greatest magic lies not in spells or shadows but in the light of friendship and the laughter of children. And with that, the orphanage was alive again, a sanctuary where joy reigned, and the only lullaby they sang was one of hope, creativity, and a little bit of mischief. Lee leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smile stretching across his face as he watched the children chatter and play. The transformation in the orphanage was palpable. No longer did the air hang heavy with fear and uncertainty. Instead, it buzzed with laughter, excitement, and the vibrant energy of youth. The dark history that had once lingered like a ghost in the corners of the rooms was now replaced with the promise of new memories, a bright future etched into the walls. As the days turned into weeks, Mr. Lee continued to fill their afternoons with lessons that were anything but ordinary. Instead of history books, they explored the world through tales of adventure. Instead of math worksheets, they crafted their own comic books filled with superheroes who could conquer their fears. Each child blossomed, and Mr. Lee felt a sense of pride as he watched them grow. One day, as they gathered for their afternoon session, May burst through the door, her eyes wide with excitement. "Mr. Lee! You won't believe what I found," she exclaimed, practically bouncing on her feet, "another lost sock." Mr. Lee joked, pretending to look serious. "If it's the sock of a legendary hero, we might have to call in the sock police." "No. It's better," May insisted, her enthusiasm infectious. "I found an old map in the library. It shows hidden places around the orphanage." "A map?" Mr. Lee's interest piqued. "A treasure map?" "Maybe. I think it leads to a secret room or something," May said, practically vibrating with excitement. The other children gathered around, intrigued. "A secret room? What if it has treasure? Or ghosts?" Jean said, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "Or an old talking cat?" Tao chimed in, raising his hands dramatically. "Who could tell us the history of the orphanage?" Okay, Mr. Lee said, raising his hands to calm the growing excitement. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Show me this map, May." She unfolded a crumpled piece of parchment, revealing faded ink and hasty sketches. The map was adorned with whimsical illustrations of the orphanage, its grounds, and what appeared to be a series of winding paths leading to a large X marked in the garden. "Looks like a classic treasure hunt," Mr. Lee said, his mind already racing with possibilities. "All right, my little explorers, let's follow this map. But we must stay together and keep an eye out for any signs of trouble." Cheers erupted as the children grabbed their makeshift explorer hats, some constructed from paper and others from towels, and lined up at the door, ready for adventure. "First stop, the garden," Mr. Lee declared, leading the way out of the orphanage and into the sunshine. The garden was a sprawling area filled with vibrant flowers, tall grass, and a few old trees that had seen better days. The children scattered, scanning the area for clues as Mr. Lee attempted to decipher the map. "This way," May shouted, pointing to a narrow path that wound between the bushes. They followed her lead, excitement bubbling in the air. The path led them to a small clearing surrounded by towering trees, where the sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating a dance of shadows on the ground. "It feels magical here," Tao exclaimed, spinning in circles. Lee chuckled, feeling the magic of the moment himself. "All right, let's take a look at the next clue," he said, peering at the map. "It says something about an ancient stone near a tree." "Over there," Jean yelled, pointing toward a gnarled old tree that stood apart from the others. The trunk was thick and twisted, and at its base, there was indeed a large, flat stone that seemed out of place. "Great eye, Jean," Mr. Lee said, leading them closer. The stone was engraved with strange symbols and letters that none of them recognized. "What does it say?" May asked, running her fingers over the surface. "I'm not sure," Mr. Lee replied, tracing the symbols. "But it looks like it could be a riddle. Let's see if we can figure it out together." The children huddled around as Mr. Lee read the inscription aloud, attempting to decipher its meaning. "To find the treasure, you must see what you cannot see, in the heart of the night, where shadows dance free. What does that mean? Tao wondered aloud. Maybe it's about looking at night. Jean suggested. We should come back after dark. Mr. Li frowned slightly, remembering the last nighttime adventure and the haunting lullaby. That could be a good idea, but we'll need to be careful, he said, trying to keep the spirit of fun while maintaining a sense of caution. Let's head back inside for now and plan our night adventure. Once inside, they discussed what supplies they might need. Flashlights? Check. Snacks? Double check. A trusty guide, Mr. Li, was also on the list. As evening fell, they gathered once more, armed with their supplies and bubbling with anticipation. All right, everyone, Mr. Li said, taking a deep breath. We're going to head out into the garden and see what secrets await us. Stick close together, and remember, there's no singing the lullaby tonight. They made their way back into the garden, the moonlight casting a soft glow over everything. The familiar sounds of crickets and rustling leaves filled the air, creating a serene backdrop to their adventure. Look. May whispered, pointing to the ancient stone. It looks different at night. Indeed, the symbols seemed to shimmer under the moonlight. Mr. Li felt a shiver run down his spine, not from fear, but from the thrill of discovery. Okay, let's see what we can find. They gathered around the stone, shining their flashlights over the engravings. The atmosphere crackled with excitement and just a hint of trepidation. Maybe we should whisper the riddle? Tao suggested, a serious look on his face. Good idea. Mr. Li agreed. They leaned in close, whispering the riddle together. To find the treasure, you must see what you cannot see, in the heart of the night, where shadows dance free. As the last words left their lips, the ground beneath the stone trembled slightly, and a soft glow emanated from the engravings. The children gasped, stepping back in awe. Did you see that? Jean exclaimed, eyes wide. It's like the stone is alive. Okay, don't panic, Mr. Li said, feeling a mix of exhilaration and anxiety. Let's keep our cool. We don't know what's going to happen next. Suddenly, the earth shifted, and a small compartment at the base of the stone creaked open, revealing a hidden hollow. Inside lay an old, dusty box adorned with more mysterious symbols. Treasure. May squealed, her voice filled with delight. Let's see what's inside, Mr. Li said, carefully lifting the box out of its resting place. He wiped off the dust and opened it slowly, revealing a collection of old trinkets, jewels, coins, and pieces of what appeared to be ancient toys. The children gasped collectively, their eyes sparkling. This is amazing. Tao breathed, reaching for a small, intricately carved wooden toy that looked like a dragon. As they began to examine the treasures, Mr. Li noticed a faded piece of parchment at the bottom of the box. He carefully unfolded it, revealing another riddle. It's a clue, he said, excitement tinging his voice. What does it say? May asked, crowding around. To keep the treasure, you must share what you find, with laughter and joy, and the secrets entwined. A heart that is open will find what is true, for the greatest of treasures are friends like you. That's beautiful. Jean exclaimed. Yeah, but what does it mean? Tao asked, furrowing his brow. I think it means we can't just keep this treasure to ourselves, Mr. Li said thoughtfully. We should share it with the whole orphanage. It could be a part of our history, a symbol of what we've built together. The children nodded enthusiastically, their faces glowing with pride at the thought of including everyone in their discovery. Let's take it back and show everyone. May suggested, bouncing on her toes. Absolutely, Mr. Li agreed, and they carefully packed up the treasures, making their way back to the orphanage, their hearts light with adventure and friendship. As they entered the building, the atmosphere was charged with excitement. Mr. Li gathered the children in the main hall, where the warm glow of lights filled the room. Everyone, gather around, he called, and soon the curious faces of their friends filled the space. What's going on? Asked a little girl named Lina, her eyes bright with curiosity. We found something incredible. Mr. Li announced, waving the old box in the air. The room fell silent, anticipation hanging in the air. "What is it?" a chorus of voices chimed. "We discovered a hidden treasure in the garden," Mr. Lee said, his excitement palpable. "But it comes with a message. It tells us that the greatest treasure of all is our friendship." He opened the box, revealing the jewels and trinkets inside. Gasps of awe filled the room as the children gathered around, their eyes wide with wonder. "Wow! Look at that!" Lina exclaimed, reaching for a sparkling gem. "Can we keep it?" Jean asked, practically bouncing on his feet. Mr. Lee smiled warmly. "We can keep it, but we will also share it with everyone. Let's use these treasures to create new memories. Perhaps we can start a tradition, where each year we add something to this collection, something that reminds us of our adventures together." The children cheered, their voices blending into a joyful chorus. They discussed ideas for how to celebrate their newfound treasures, brainstorming plans for a grand reveal to the entire orphanage. As they settled down for the evening, Mr. Lee felt a sense of fulfillment. The shadows that once haunted the orphanage were now just memories, replaced with laughter, adventure, and the bond of friendship that tied them all together. The ancient lullaby, once a harbinger of doom, had transformed into a part of their story, a reminder of their strength in unity. That night, as Mr. Lee tucked the children into bed, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. He knew they had faced fears together, and through it all, they had emerged stronger. As he left the room, he turned back, smiling at the sight of the sleeping children. With the moonlight streaming in and the sounds of the night gently lulling him to sleep, Mr. Lee realized that they had forged a new chapter in the orphanage's history, a chapter filled with light, laughter, and love. And as he closed the door softly, he felt a warmth in his heart, knowing that the true treasure was not in the box of jewels, but in the bonds they had created, a treasure that would last a lifetime. In the days that followed, the children embraced their new tradition, taking turns to share stories and create little treasures of their own. Each child contributed something meaningful, whether it was a painting, a poem, or a small token that represented their experiences. The collection grew, becoming a vibrant tapestry of their lives together, and through it all, Mr. Lee continued to weave humor and joy into every lesson. He taught them about science using outrageous experiments that made them giggle, and history through tales of epic battles fought with marshmallows. One afternoon, he decided to take them on a field trip to a nearby park. "Pack your picnic baskets, adventurers," he announced, and the children erupted into cheers. "We're going on a quest for the best picnic spot." As they explored the park, running and playing, Mr. Lee felt a sense of peace envelop him. Watching the children laugh and bond brought him joy. They climbed trees, played games, and even attempted to build the tallest tower of sandwiches, which ended up toppling over in a delightful mess of bread and toppings. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the park, they settled down on a blanket, sharing their picnic feast. Mr. Lee encouraged them to tell stories about their favorite moments at the orphanage, their laughter blending with the sounds of nature. Tao, with a mischievous grin, launched into an exaggerated tale about how he had once battled a giant raccoon in the garden, claiming he had emerged victorious. The children roared with laughter, their imaginations running wild, and then, Tao said, gesturing dramatically, "I saved the treasure from the clutches of the evil raccoon, who was after our jewels." "Evil raccoon?" May shouted, clutching her stomach as she laughed. "What was his name?" "Rascal the raccoon?" "Exactly. Rascal." Tao replied, his eyes gleaming with excitement. As the stories continued to flow, Mr. Lee realized that these moments, the laughter, the friendships, the sheer joy of being together, were the essence of what he had hoped to create in the orphanage. It was not just a home for the children, it was a place where they could thrive, where they could learn, explore, and discover their true selves. Later that evening, as they returned to the orphanage, the stars twinkled brightly overhead. Mr. Lee felt a sense of wonder, a feeling that this journey was just beginning. They had faced darkness, embraced light, and together, they had crafted a beautiful narrative woven with laughter and love. In the following weeks, the children began to share their stories with the wider community, organizing a small fair to showcase their art and treasures. The orphanage opened its doors, inviting families from the neighborhood to join in the festivities. Mr. Lee watched with pride as the children showcased their talents, creating a vibrant atmosphere of creativity, and joy.as families mingled, sharing laughter and stories. Mr. Lee felt a warmth spreading through his heart. The once forbidding orphanage had transformed into a hub of life and happiness, a beacon of hope in the community. Mr. Lee, a voice called out, breaking his reverie. It was May, holding up a colorful painting she had created. "Look! It's our treasure box. I painted everything we found." Mr. Lee's heart swelled with pride as he admired her work. The painting depicted the box overflowing with treasures, surrounded by children and the spirit of friendship that had become the heart of their lives together. "This is beautiful, May. You've captured the magic perfectly," he praised, giving her a gentle hug. The fair continued, laughter echoed through the orphanage, blending with the sounds of music and the delightful aroma of food. The community had embraced them, and Mr. Lee knew that they had created something truly special. That night, as the stars twinkled above and the sounds of laughter faded into the night, Mr. Lee gathered the children for a final story before bed. He settled into his chair, ready to weave another tale of adventure. "Tonight, I'm going to tell you about the adventures of a brave group of explorers who discovered a magical land where laughter was the strongest magic of all," he began, his voice steady and warm. As he spoke, he watched the children's faces light up with wonder, their eyes sparkling with excitement. Mr. Lee knew then that the magic of the orphanage would continue to grow, nourished by the bonds they had forged and the stories they would create together. And as they drifted off to sleep, surrounded by the warmth of friendship and love, the echoes of laughter lingered in the air, a beautiful lullaby that would forever resonate within the walls of the orphanage, a reminder of the treasures that lay not just in jewels and trinkets, but in the hearts of those who dared to dream together. In the heart of the night, where shadows danced free, the greatest treasure of all had been found, the treasure of love, laughter, and an unbreakable bond between friends. The end.